everyone, it's Lauren and this is my June reading wrap-up. It is so hot in London right now, I might actually cry, so we need to get through these very quickly so I can just go and sit in my bath of ice cubes. The first two books I read in June was a continuation of my feminist short text series, which was published by Vintage Classics, I think? No, just Vintage. And they were The Second Sex and The Beauty Myth. The full text of The Second Sex, I think, is like 800 pages or something ridiculous. This is just the introduction, one chapter, which is the independent woman, and then the conclusion. So definitely just an extract. This was really interesting. I'm pleased I read it almost as a historical text. Like, it's interesting seeing what was considered radical at that time. This was published in 1949. And yes, so much of it is still true today, although it's from a very different perspective. Women are just kind of starting to go to work. I don't know that I would want to read the whole Second Sex, to be honest. After reading this, I'm pleased that I read it, but Simone de Beauvoir's ideas seem to just run on into each other. But when I was reading the main chapter in the middle, it's like she talks about women in the workplace and the women, how they grow up, and then she talks about this, and she just kind of seems to run on, and then her ideas go somewhere else, and you think, oh, like, this is kind of relevant to the independent woman. I suppose the independent woman is a very vague chapter heading, and it could cover a lot of things, but it doesn't feel very well structured or very well segmented, and it was hard to follow her, what she was saying, basically. Like, I'm glad I read it, but I was kind of reading it, I had to reread a lot, going, how did she get there? But everything she's saying is wonderful and correct and interesting, but wouldn't really recommend it as a read other than from an academic perspective. Then The Beauty Myth, which was published in 1991, I really liked. This is an abridged version again. There's about 100 pages. I'm not sure how long the full text is. This is over 20 years old now, but I would actually really recommend reading it because it covers so many things that are still so relevant today. It does feel a little bit out of date when you're reading it, but it's just, everything is so true. The main concept is the idea that we've all bought into this idea of a woman's worth is determined by how beautiful she is, and you can judge what a woman is like based on her clothing, based on her appearance, and no matter what you do, even if you argue like women shouldn't have to be beautiful, the response to that is, oh, you're just jealous because you're ugly, and how the general media display images of the perfect woman and make women feel uncomfortable about themselves in order that we feel duped into buying products that we need in order to look beautiful. The rise and the problem of anorexia and bulimia and self-esteem issues, all of this stuff is so relevant, and it's split into small little chapters of different topics. Very easy to read. I would actually considering reading the full Beauty Myth myself now after reading this, and I actually think this little short form is a really nice place to start with feminism in general. So yeah, I'm really pleased that I got all three of these books, because it's a really nice kind of whistle-stop tour of feminism through the ages, starting in the 18th century and coming all the way up to 1991. I wouldn't recommend buying them if you've not read any kind of feminist literature before, because so much of what's happening in these two isn't that relevant to where we are as a movement now. But it was interesting as a look back across history for me, and I'm really pleased that I got these because I probably wouldn't have picked up the full text of these. This has kind of enabled me to dip my toes into them, if you like, and it's just, I mean, this was published in 1792, and so much of what she says is still relevant. Like, we've come a long way, guys, but oh my god, we still have so much further to go. Then the next book I read in June was Franny and Zooey by Salinger, and I am so pleased that I picked this up because I did not like The Catcher in the Rye at all. I think I just read it just because I thought, oh, that's a famous one, I'll read it, and I just didn't really like it, I didn't really get it, I didn't really know what it was about. And I'm pleased that I gave Salinger another try because I really enjoyed this. Franny and Zooey are the youngest siblings of the Glass family, and you get two sections in here. They're kind of a snapshot of each one's day. So you get a small snapshot in one of Franny's days, and then later on when she's at home you get a day of her and Zooey at their parents' house. They're from a family of child geniuses, a family of 8 children I believe, and they're all incredibly clever, and these two are now at the age where they're at university, and it is similar themes actually to The Catcher in the Rye, where he's struggling with the idea of people being phonies and like the fakery of other people who are intelligent and sort of purporting themselves to be very deep and meaningful. And Franny, particularly in this book, is struggling with the concept of truth and of religion and what it's all about, like what's the real meaning behind all of this. But it's really quite dry and it's really quite funny. And I would be really interested in reading the other books. There's some other books in this series which follow the Glass family, but I don't think you have to read them in any kind of order. I certainly read this and it explained everything to me. I didn't feel like I was going in halfway through a story. So really pleased with this one actually. And I would also say if you're not a classics reader and you're looking to try to get into reading a bit more of the literary canon, if you like, this is very easy to read, and I think this would be a really good way in. And the next book I read was Pride and Prejudice, which was a reread for me, and it was just nice. It was just really nice to read it. I'm sure everyone knows what Pride and Prejudice is about. I decided to reread it because it is going to be the next book that is featured in my Page to Screen series. So look out for that in the next couple of weeks. It was just a really enjoyable read. I think I read Northanger Abbey a couple of months ago, and it's really interesting to see how much more accomplished Jane Austen's writing is in Pride and Prejudice, and the kind of the evolution of it. It's much better structured in my opinion, Northanger Abbey. I did like Northanger Abbey, but it wasn't that well structured. It was a little bit all over the place. Pride and Prejudice is so much more on point, and it's very funny, and it's just really nice. It was just an enjoyable reread. And finally in June, I'm so pleased I got round to reading Cloud Atlas, and I'm just so happy. I'm so happy I read it because I had such a thing in my head about it being hard, and I don't know why. I just thought, oh, I don't want to read that because that's a hard book, and I just never wanted to pick it up, and I forced myself to do it, and I'm really pleased that I did. This is a collection of 6 short stories, and the way that they're written is almost like a pyramid or like a butterfly is what I would think of. You start with the first half of the first story, and then you get the beginning of the second story, and then halfway through that you get the beginning of the third story, and it goes all the way in to the 6th story, which is in full, and then you get all of the endings. So you start with the ending of the 5th story and then the ending of the 4th, and it kind of concertinas back out again until you get to the end of the first story. It starts in the past and then it goes up to sort of present day and then into the future. And I knew that all the stories were linked, but what I didn't realise, which I think is really, really clever, is that each of the previous stories will appear in the next one as a form of media. So all of the stories are written in very different ways. So you might have a diary entry or letters or an interview, and then in the next story up, if you like, on the ladder, you'll have someone discovering the letters or the film, and they are consuming the previous story as that different form of media, and I thought that was a really, really clever technique. Throughout the 6 stories, I feel like the overarching theme was very much about standing up to tyranny and not allowing society to go down that sort of dystopian route, or allowing greed and corruption to kind of take over. And just reminding us that we're all linked together, and that the future that we want for society can exist. We just have to all make sure that we fight to make it what we want it to be. Despite the fact that I thought it was very, very clever, and I thought it was a very good book, and it really has stayed with me. I keep thinking about it, and all the links I thought were wonderful, and I just loved finding it out, going, oh, that's like what happened in that story, and it is very, very clever. But I don't know if I enjoyed reading it. I think having 6 beginnings in a row is quite tiring, because you start from the beginning, and then just as you're getting into a story, that will end, and you have to start again and get to know these new characters. And then once you get to the middle, okay, you get all of the endings, and then it starts getting very, very quick, and like, oh, what's happening, because it all ends on like a cliffhanger or something. But then you have to remember what happened, you know, days ago when you were reading it, and kind of get back up to speed. And although I loved that idea, I think in practical terms it made it not that enjoyable, but at the same time I really appreciated it. I thought it was really clever, but it's still hard to read 6 beginnings and not get a little bit despondent and just be like, okay, when are these gonna end? So I guess my summary would be like a very, very good book. Glad I read it. I would recommend reading it, but not one of my favourite books ever. So that's my wrap up. I'm really pleased with what I read in June. I felt like it was quite eclectic. I didn't have a great May. I think I read like 3 books or something. So yeah, I feel quite good. I felt like I got some literature down me. As always, I would love to hear your comments below. If you've read any of these books, let me know what you've been reading in June, what you're planning to read over the summer, and I will see you in my next video. Bye! The book is written in 2 halves. You have a section set now and a section set in like Renaissance Italy, and depending on the copy of the book you've got, you could have the modern section first, or you could have the historical section first. I read this modern section, then passed